Hey, soccer fans, and welcome back to another episode of the Sons of a Pitch, an American soccer podcast. Tonight, we continue our team previews, getting ready for the 2020 MLS season, 25th anniversary of the league. Tonight, we're going to head out west and let you know how the San Jose Earthquakes look prior to this season. Then we're going to bounce back to the Midwest, review the Columbus Crew and all of their latest signings and player acquisitions. And we're going to wrap up, staying kind of Midwestern, maybe a little more flyover in Ohio, with Sporting Kansas City. Big signing this offseason, could be a big impact player, so stay tuned to hear how San Jose, Columbus, and Sporting Kansas City will fare this upcoming season as you listen to the Sons of a Pitch, an American soccer podcast. Well, hey, soccer fans, this is Nick Pateras, one of your hosts here at the Sons of a Pitch, an American soccer podcast. I am joined by my good friend and fellow host, Mike Guglielmi. And Mike, let me tell you, it's good to be back on the show with you. I missed you last week, but I'll tell you, a Thermaflu pack and 3 days on the couch really does wonders for someone's health.
Nice. It's good to have you back, man. I'm glad you're feeling better. And I never thought I'd be able to talk to myself for an hour straight, but I did it.
Well, I'm glad you did it, and I know our listeners are glad because we got to keep our soccer conversation going here. And for all of you out there who are listening, if you want to join our conversation, follow us along on Facebook at Sons of a Pitch Soccer, on Twitter at SOP Soccer, or on YouTube, look up Sons of a Pitch Soccer Podcast. We'd like to thank everyone who has followed along and joined the conversation. The Tanganga Gain at GoFins21, intro makers for YouTubers, so go check them out if you're looking to get started and do some more videos. I know that it's helped Mike in his production as well. Thanks to the Free Kick Pod, Maryland's #1 union-based podcast, so go check those out, Union fans. Thank you to Joseph Porco, who does Porzo, sounds Italian. He does a Serie A blog. Sorry, I didn't mean to call him Porco. That was Serie A. Dude. Serie A. Yeah, you know, my accents are terrible.
All respect from that guy right there, just so you know.
All right, and I called him Joseph Porco too, so that's probably not I was off to a bad start, so I might as well just jump in.
I'm sorry, Joseph. Please excuse my co-host.
Yeah, next time, Mike, you take the Italian stuff. I'll stick to the Greeks. Thanks to Coach R, who's a UEFA coach, Patrick White, John Donovan, Allison, Octoblue, and Sean Collins. Thank you all for following us along on Twitter and joining our conversation there. Additionally, big thanks to John Colt and Jose Carlos Rosales for following us along on YouTube. And speaking of YouTube, we do want to mention that we got a couple comments on our last videos. On our Montreal Impact video, we got a comment from Felix Hertau, who said that talking about the Impact without talking about Aquanco and Lapalainen just doesn't make any sense to him. Also, Boyan is very young and can make a big difference for the club. So, Felix, thank you for the comment. We appreciate you reaching out to us. When we were preparing for our team previews, we're using the MLS Transfer Tracker, which is on the MLSsoccer.com website, and I don't think Aquanco had signed. Mike, you're our resident Canadian here. Fill us in on...
Yeah, no, it was the next day. It actually, the news broke that he was coming back from Bologna. So, yeah, that one was, unfortunately, before I could get it, once I had it recorded to the point where I got it uploaded on YouTube, that deal happened. So, again, I apologize for that. That's the reason there. As far as Lapalainen, complete brain fart. I just completely missed that one. But that's why we have listeners and viewers to correct us and give us some good content. Listen, we're two guys. We can't know every single detail about every single team here in the league. We try our best, and we're getting better at it. But we need the help of the listeners, the viewers, and everybody else to help us become the best soccer podcast in America.
And also a thank you to Sandra Lawson, who watched our New England Revolution preview. She writes, correction, Michael Mancien is still on the team, and she's right. Unfortunately, the MLS transfer tracker had his option as declined, but it turns out he had actually signed a deal back in November, extending his contract. So Michael Mancien, the English defender, still with the Revs, looks to be a contributor along the back line for them going forward. So thank you, Sandra, for filling us in and keeping an eye on your New England Revolution. And then finally, we want to thank everyone who left a review on iTunes recently. A couple over the last month. We want to say from Halas Ole Ole, always enjoy listening. Both are very knowledgeable and enjoy what they do. 5 stars. Also, from December, we got one that I missed. It says, "Oh, snap, soccer." Simply put, it's soccer. I was looking for something less corporate than some of my other favorite pods about the MLS, and these guys hit it on the mark. Only thing I didn't like was their opinion of Nagby. Put simply, it was bad. So we want to thank Flat Tanker for the 5-star review. We really appreciate it. And, hey, we hope Nagby does great things now that he's back in Columbus, reunited with Porter and playing for his home state team. Just personally, he's not one of my favorite players. I think his stats are probably better than his eye test, for whatever that's worth. So we all know our opinions on Darlington Nagby, and that's not what we're here to dwell on. We can get on a little bit of that as we get into our Columbus preview. But Mike, you're doing a little extra work on YouTube. Why don't you let the fans know what you're working on?
Yeah, so on YouTube, we're putting together all of the team previews, which you guys are hearing when we do 3 together in one episode. But I'll be putting them all individually up on YouTube, and we are attempting to grow our business on YouTube video by video, lots of different content. We're probably going to expand during the season as well. We'll do normal picks and predictions and possibly some other videos. Now, the point here is we are going to be doing a little bit of a giveaway here. The goal is to get to 1,000 YouTube subscribers for monetization. That's how it works. 1,000 YouTube subscribers is the goal for us. We want to get there by opening day, February 29th. That is exactly 1 month and 1 day away from now as you're listening to this. So we need our listeners to jump on and subscribe to our YouTube channel, Sons of a Pitch, an American soccer podcast. You can find it there on YouTube. Just search that and subscribe. Make sure you're a Twitter follower as well. And if we reach that 1,000 subscribers on YouTube by February 29th, opening day, then I will personally mail you a $100 Visa gift card. Just got to be one of our Twitter followers so we can do the random drawing for that. And hopefully you'll get lucky enough. So please tell your friends about it. Make sure they add us on YouTube and Twitter as well as you do. And let's get up to 1,000 YouTube subscribers and do a little giveaway.
Mike's putting his money where his mouth is, everyone. That's a rare occurrence, so take advantage of it. But now, the real reason why we are here, we are going to put our mouth on some soccer talk. That sounded terrible. That was an awful transition. That was probably one of the worst transitions I've had in a while. So let's just move right into the San Jose Earthquakes and spare me the mockery and the embarrassment of hearing me prattle on and try to come up with some clever transition. Mike, you were able to put together a lot of the notes for the players in and out here. So kick us off. Who is in for the Quakes? Who's out for the Quakes? And then, as we do with all the other teams, we'll review the DPs, some potential youngsters that can break out, and then we'll look at who is going to be the team MVP and some projection lineups.
Absolutely. We'll also do some predictions on how we think the team will end up towards the end of the segment for San Jose. One quick note for San Jose, Mike Kleeman, this is for you. Shout out for sending us that good information. Look back on YouTube for our Facebook Live, Twitter Live, YouTube Live event. I addressed some of the things that Mike Kleeman sent to us. He's kind of got an inside track there with the Earthquakes. As well, he purchased some swag through Redbubble. So moving your team right up to the top of the list there, San Jose Earthquakes. Some of the players in, we've got defender Casey Walls, a homegrown player, goalkeeper Emmanuel Ochoa, another homegrown, and as well a defender Tanner Beeson, the pick in the Super Draft. So not a lot of movement in. You might consider Christian Espinoza, their designated player, a player in because he was signed permanently with that, I believe it was $2.5 million transfer fee, the biggest transfer for San Jose. But some of the players out, defender Francois Affolter, Jimmy Ockford, Kevin Partida, all had their options declined, as well as Harold Cummings is out of contract, and Animal Godoy was traded to Nashville. So not a ton of movement for San Jose this offseason, kind of sticking with what they've got. Matias Almeida is back for another season at the helm of the Earthquakes. Nick, what are your thoughts here? I mean, you've got you've got a team that I would say they excelled against expectations last season. They did better than most people thought. Almeida's system was working there, kind of got better and better as the season went on. What do you think as far as this team that they have? Do you think they can add some more? Do you think is this kind of steady what we're going to see? What are your thoughts on San Jose and their player movement?
Sure. Two things jump out based on the players that we listed. Of the players in, 2 defenders and a goalkeeper. Of the players out, 4 defenders and a midfielder. So they're really rotating their back line. They feel comfortable and confident in their central midfield or their midfielder players who can do the man-to-man marking that Almeida's system requires. So now it's just a matter of making sure your back line is solid enough. And if it's going well, I can see San Jose maybe flashing some cash and bringing in a couple of defenders either over the next few weeks before the season starts or at least in that summer transfer window. I know it's crazy. I know I said San Jose could flash some cash and bring in some defenders, but we saw what Ike Opara did for Minnesota last season. We saw the Chad Marshall effect after he left Seattle. We know how good Kansas City has been strictly because of their defense. So while this is a goal-scoring league, you got to have a solid center back. You got to have some sort of defense in order so you're not bleeding goals and you're not in shootouts every game. So that being said, it's possible that San Jose makes a move for a free agent defender or an international defender based on how they're doing. And we saw they spent the money for Christian Espinoza. They spent the money for Mateus Almeida, and things are going well. And from what Mike Kleeman, our loyal listener and San Jose season ticket holder, has said, it's possible that ownership finally opens up a little bit of the wallet because you got to compete with LAFC, you got to compete with the Galaxy, and now you got Sacramento coming into the league too, that you're competing for fan base as much as you are points and goals. So I'm anxious to see how San Jose kind of shores up their back line, but I'm sure they're going to rely a lot on their midfielders to do a lot of that marking and tracking back.
Yeah, and speaking of center backs and defenders, so one of the things that Mike Kleeman had mentioned in his email to us was that looks like they were going to hopefully sign. Almeida was hoping they would get a signing done by the weekend of a center back. And now there's some serious news going on here as far as reports about Osvaldo Alanis, the center back from Chivas, would possibly be reuniting with Almeida at San Jose. So that could happen. It might not happen. I'm not 100% sure. But those are the rumors and reports coming out right now. So, I'm guessing just by the way that things have been going with these team previews, that we're going to record this now and it's a report. And by the time this gets released, it's going to happen.
Yeah, you're going to have to put some sort of disclaimer or something in the comments when you upload it to YouTube that this defender or whoever it was got signed from Chivas right after we said it was only a possibility. So, exactly. But it sounds like one of the more realistic MLS rumors that we've been hearing over the last couple of months or so, especially again the influx of players from Liga MX to the MLS, especially a connection between a Chivas player and Mateus Almeida going out to California. Makes perfect sense to me. Wouldn't surprise me if San Jose gets it done shortly. So with that, the players in, the players out, a little bit of a discussion on what to expect. Mike, who are the 3 DPs on the roster?
All right, so there's actually not 3 DPs for San Jose. They only have 2, so that means they have 1 open slot. But the first is Christian Espinoza.
An open DP spot, you say, as we finish a conversation about an international defender. Imagine how I keep that up. That's interesting. See, my transitions aren't terrible.
They're getting better, Nick. They're getting better. Christian Espinoza, 24 years old. We spoke about him earlier. Club record transfer fee. The guy came from Villarreal in La Liga, so he has some definite skill there. Played for the Argentinian youth teams in the Olympics and the Under-20 World Cup. Last season, he had 2 goals and 13 assists, so kind of more of a creator than a scorer, although it looks like he can get some goals as well. Solid season for him. Now he's a permanent player. He's not on loan. He has been signed permanently by San Jose. 24 years old, he's only going to get better. I think this is going to be a solid DP spot for him, kind of being that creator, that number 10, distributing to the forwards. So that's number one. Number two is Vako, the 26-year-old Georgian international. 8 goals and 5 assists last season. Played for Vitesse in the Eredivisie, and then went to Legia Warsaw on loan before joining San Jose. This guy, I think he really needs a breakout season, in my opinion. I think he is kind of sitting on the kind of like more of a winger type, forward winger hybrid. And 8 goals and 5 assists in a season isn't going to cut it for a DP in that type of position. So I think he really needs to break out in order to stick around with San Jose. As far as that third spot, it's still open. I'm not sure if Alanis would be considered a designated player, if he would be a TAM player, or how that would break down. If he did come in as a DP, I could see that happening. As far as if it was TAM, it would leave that spot open still for something to happen possibly in the summer, but I don't see them going crazy before the season if it's not Alanis.
Yeah, so looking at those two guys, I agree with you there, Mike. An MLS club is pushed forward by their DPs. I mean, every club in every sport really wants kind of their lower profile guys to step up and their lesser paid guys to step up so they can get the value. But in the MLS, you need your DPs to be your best players week in and week out in training camp, on game day, and in every aspect of your club. So Christian Espinoza, club record fee. He's got to live up to that. Vako, DP money in the prime of his career, he's got to live up to that as well. There are a lot of youngsters on this squad, and there's a couple that we picked to kind of have a breakout year, but you've got a solid midfield with guys like Magnus Eriksson, guys like Shea Salinas, and especially guys like Jackson Ewell, the kind of budding USMNT midfielder who a lot of people are excited about. So you've got a solid core there. So you need your DPs to really step up, convert the goal-scoring opportunities they're going to get, create plays, and really propel this team forward. Now, speaking of those youngsters, Mike, we've noted Marcos Lopez and Sayed Haji as a couple guys who are going to break out. Marcos Lopez, 20-year-old defender. He's on a TAM deal, a Peruvian international, has played on the U20s. Seems like Peru could be that next big hotspot of South American talent. We just saw DC United sign Edson Flores, I think his name is.
Yeah.
So, and now we've got Marcos Lopez coming up with the San Jose senior team. So he's a guy to keep a lookout for, as well as Sayed Haji, another 20-year-old midfielder, generation Adidas type player, number 2 pick in the Super Draft, but also a great story. He was a Somalian refugee. Make sure you go check him out. Look up who he is. He could be a very household name in MLS within a couple years. Mike, you correctly note out in our kind of pre-show notes here that usually these generation Adidas players really break out in their second season, and it looks like that's where Haji is right now. So what are your extra thoughts on these guys? Can they contribute to the first team, or are they just kind of there for depth and experience right now?
Yeah, I definitely think Marcos Lopez, the 20-year-old defender, can contribute in the, could possibly be a starter. In my projected starting 11, which we'll get to in a minute, I do have him as that starting left back. He's a TAM signing. He's from Peru. It's hard to put a TAM signing as a breakout youngster, but the fact that the guy is only 20 years old, he's not really a household name outside of the circles of San Jose. So I'm sure the San Jose fans know him and know him well, but other fans probably don't know this guy by name yet. And I'm assuming that by the end of the season, there's a good chance they will know who he is. Sayed Haji, definitely, Generation Adidas. The second year is kind of the year that it all starts for Generation Adidas guys. So with him, it looks like, that kind of his work ethic and what he was doing, last year and a few appearances that he got, I think that he might end up doing something special for San Jose and becoming a good depth piece this season.
Excellent. So based on all of that, who do you have for your projected starting 11?
Yeah, so with a 4-4-2, Again, this could change. Went with their their lineups from last season, towards the end of last season. So it's 4-4-2. The goaltender will be Vega. In the defense, I've got Lopez, Youngworth, Kashia, and Lima. In the midfield, Vaco, Erickson, Espinoza, Uil, and then up front, Husin and Wondolowski. I think there's some competition there with Andy Rios in the as the starter for a striker position, so that might happen. He could get up there. They seem to like to bring Husin off the bench last season. He does have some decent speed, so that could be one of the reasons why. Also, I know Jackson Uil in the starting 11. I think this is I wanted to put him as a breakout youngster, but unfortunately, I feel like he's already broken out since the attention he's been getting with the U.S. national team, so on and so forth. He's kind of a household name in MLS already. So this another inside tidbit of information is that apparently Jackson Uil back in last season during one of the games, after the game, he kind of spoke out a little bit and got loud and was kind of pumped up, and that usually doesn't happen from him. He's not really a loud, outspoken type of guy, and Almeida saw that and loved it and pulled him aside and was like, hey, keep that up. I like this. I want to see more of this. And so it really seems like Almeida really likes Jackson Uil for the talent that he has, the kid that he is, and expect to see a lot more of him this season, as well as expect to see him break out, because I think with that kind of talent, if he's getting the minutes, it's going to bode well for San Jose. So that's kind of the starting 11 that I've got there. To me, that's a really strong midfield. Defense could probably use a little bit of help. Lopez has to have a good season. Lima, I like Nick Lima. He's a good youngster who's gotten a cup of coffee with USMNT as well. The center backs, I'm not 100% sure of, but as we talked about earlier, it looks like they're going to be shopping around for some center backs as we speak. So right. Those are kind of my thoughts on the starting 11. What do you think, Nick?
Well, to add to what you're saying about shopping for a center back and the rumors around Oswaldo Alanis, looking his player profile up on Transfer Market, which I think is a pretty decent website for valuing players. Alanis is valued at $2.05 million. So that puts him right on that cusp of DP TAM signing. He's 30 years old, but playing as a center back in the MLS, he could probably extend his career a little bit more. Probably has a lot of good minutes on his legs if he ends up coming to San Jose. They do play that pressing system, but again, it's something he's familiar with from his days with Almeida under Chivas, when Almeida was coaching Chivas. So yeah. He could be that DP signing, maybe on a 2-year deal, and we'll just kind of see how it goes. Then again, you bring him in on a big TAM deal, and then keep that DP spot open to have the flexibility to put the team over the top. It's kind of funny, like everyone's kind of been forgetting about San Jose lately with the LAFC LA Galaxy rivalry, the entry of Sacramento, how good Seattle has been. People are kind of forgetting that San Jose has really given themselves a lot of roster flexibility and really built a solid young midfield core. So keep on the lookout for San Jose and see what they do. It could come down to how well their most important players play. We talked about the DPs, and we're going to get into our picks for most important player for the team. And this is where Mike and I disagree. I think not only do your DPs have to be that good, but we really need to see Uil take a step forward and Danny Husin take a step forward. So we talked about Uil from his playmaking and his ability in the midfield. Also, he has to learn how to mark better. Danny Husin, though, he's got to pick up the scoring. I don't think you're going to see Wondolowski net as many goals as we saw the last season. I think that resurgence for him was a one-time deal. As much as the fans love Wondolowski, as much as a lot of people love watching him play and find the back of the net, Danny Husin's got to step up and have a 10-goal season if we're going to see anything from San Jose this year. Now, Mike, I'm looking at our notes here. You disagree with me.
I do. I've got Chris Wondolowski as that most important player. It is very rare to have a team have their most important player not be a DP. Chris Wondolowski, I think the reason why I go this route is when you look back at last season, in the beginning of the season, Wondolowski was not there. and things weren't going well for San Jose. Now, mind you, they had the new coach. They were, Almeida was still working his magic and learning the system, and we're learning his guys. But Wondolowski started to turn it up and had a great second half of the season, so to say, maybe even a little bit more in the second half. Danny Houston is very important. However, I don't think he can get it done on his own. And Wondolowski is that poacher, that number one striker for this team. And if they are going to be successful, Wondolowski is going to have to continue that success that he had last year towards the end of the season when the team started to do well and kind of fight for that last playoff position. Wondolowski needs this big season and to continue to stay up there in order for this team to be successful. If Wondolowski goes back to not scoring any goals like a year and a half ago or so, it's going to be very hard for this team. They're not going to be able to ride Danny Houston's to the playoffs. It's not going to happen. So that's why I have Chris Wondolowski as the most important player for San Jose.
So if they lose that offensive output, obviously the floor for them this year is they crash out of the playoffs. They lose all the momentum that they've built over the last year. Maybe they don't get the offseason signings or the transfer signings that they're looking for, and they just go back to kind of that mediocrity, below average San Jose team. But what do you think the ceiling is? If everything goes right, how could their season end up?
Yeah, so if everything goes right, I think they make the playoffs. The Western Conference is so stacked. I'm really excited to watch the Western Conference unfold over the season. I'm an Eastern Conference guy, being from Toronto and being a TFC fan. I usually follow the Eastern Conference more, but this season, I think the Western Conference is the conference to watch. I mean, the teams that are there, the teams that missed last year got so much better. And I think that I'm going to go with probably about a 4 or 5 seed for San Jose if all goes well. So if Wando keeps scoring, they're playing well. They do bring in a good center back to kind of straighten out that back line a little bit more with that young talent, and everybody gets better. Almeida has another great season. My guess is probably a 4 seed and getting a home playoff game in San Jose at Earthquake Stadium.
Well, San Jose starts the season February 29th, hosting Toronto FC. Speaking of, Mike, again, it looks like the league is really putting together an Eastern Conference, Western Conference opening weekend thus far. So we'll see if San Jose can start the season off on that right foot against your beloved Reds there, Mike.
Hopefully not.
No offense to all our San Jose fans.
Exactly.
Well, next up on our list of teams to preview, none other than one of my favorite teams, the Columbus Crew. Got their jersey. You can see it in some of our old videos. It was a wonderful gift for my kids to have that distinct checkerboard pattern hanging in the background and hanging in my closet right now. Columbus being the first MLS franchise, there's a little nostalgia there. Being a Midwestern team, there's a connection there for us. So happy to be previewing Columbus right now, but unfortunately, nostalgia doesn't help you out in the standings. History doesn't help you out in the standings, and Columbus has a long road to get back to prominence, to get back and maybe add that second star on their jersey. I don't think it's going to come this season because some of their biggest signings that they've brought in were Darlington Nagbe and Fernando Adi, who just was announced today. And Adi has signed to what's reportedly a TAM deal. He's not going to take up a DP spot. So those are their big signings, as well as midfielder Lucas Zillarayan, a transfer in from Tigres of Liga MX. They also added Axel Skilberg, Matt Lampson, Vito Wormgoor, Aiden Morris, and none other than Triple G's son, Sebastian Berhalter, to a homegrown deal. So those are the players in for Columbus. Those are the guys looking to add a little depth, or in the cases of Nagbe and Adi, make an immediate impact on the starting 11. Players.
How do our USMNT fans feel about Sebastian Berhalter signing to the Columbus Crew? So anybody that's an avid follower of USMNT let us know down in the comments here on YouTube or, on Twitter. Let us know your thoughts on Sebastian Berhalter and his homegrown contract with the Columbus Crew.
Yeah, I'm guessing they have no thoughts since
Nick.
he has no impact on the USMNT right now. Well, if you're part of the tinfoil hat conspiracies of all the patronage going on in USMNT with Greg and Jay Berhalter, then hey, yeah, maybe we do see Sebastian get called up some point relatively quickly. But
I'm not talking about getting called up to the USMNT. I just think it's very interesting that this guy gets signed to a homegrown deal. So thoughts there, not necessarily him getting pulled into the USMNT.
Okay.
That's not even a chance.
So we can keep our tinfoil hats on for now. It's just nothing
I
national
just want
team
the tinfoil
related.
hats for how this guy got signed to a contract.
Okay. I'm sure he earned it. He's been with their academy system. I'm sure he earned his way just like everybody else in American soccer. Let's be honest there. Now, back to the Columbus Crew roster. The players on the outs, David Accam traded to Nashville, and Luis Argudo was picked up in the expansion draft. So those are kind of the two names that we would recognize. The rest of the group has had their options declined. Goalie Ben Lundgaard, defender Alex Crognale, midfielders Guzman, Opoku, Sosa, Clark, Federico Higuain, the biggest name possibly in Columbus Crew history, had his option declined as well. So we saw his last couple years kind of plagued by injury and underperformance, and really he was just trying to do what he was able to do through sheer willpower and veteran guile. But unfortunately, it looks like his legs gave out on him, and the club is kind of in this weird transition time, redoing the roster, so they declined Higuain, Pipa's option there. And then finally, defender Condor Maloney's option was declined. So those are the roster moves by Columbus lately. But again, I think any sort of players on the out have been able to be offset by bringing in Fernando Adi and bringing in Darlington Nagbe, a couple of guys who are immediately going to improve the offense for this Crew team. What do you think, Mike?
Yeah, definitely. Lots more movement in than movement out. You've got Darlington Nagbe is going to make an impact regardless of our opinions on him over the past year and a half. He's going to make an impact on this Columbus side as well. Axel Sjoberg is a good signing. He's a steady MLS vet. He was a best 11 MLS guy a couple years ago. Lucas Zelarayan from Tigres. If you're coming from Tigres, you got to be good. Although I do have some thoughts on him, and I'll get into that a little bit in this DP review. Fernando Adi is not really it's not a great signing. For as bad as this guy has been over the past season and a half, even with Portland before he left for Cincinnati, he has not been good. But getting reunited with Caleb Porter, maybe and most likely into a spot where he's coming in off the bench, not a ton of pressure on him, I think that can bode well for Columbus. Dangerous team with some of these additions they made. And got to give a shout out to the former TFC general manager, Tim Bezbachenko, who's now the president over there. He's doing a good job. It's a very solid offseason for Columbus. So that's my thoughts on the players in and out. Now let's talk a little bit about the designated players. So I want to jump right in with Lucas Zelarayan, 27-year-old, signed from Tigres in December. He's an attacking midfielder. He can play the wing, prefers to play more of a number 10 spot, but he can play the wing. $8.5 million transfer fee. Not great career assist numbers. So that's what really sticks out to me. When you're playing that number 10 in MLS, you've got to have – that's kind of what the number 10s are judged by, right? So you got, Sasha Kljestan a couple of years ago. He was that number 10 for the Red Bulls. You've got Victor Vasquez a couple years ago for Toronto FC. It was all about the assists. Yeah, you can pitch in with some goals. That's great. But really need those assist numbers to be big. This is one of the places where he kind of lacks a little bit when you go back and look at his career stats with Tigres. Not a ton. He really never impressed me in the games that I watched for Tigres. Now, mind you, it was a very small handful of games that I watched Tigres, mostly all in the CCL. So I don't really watch many Liga MX games. But he really didn't really shine to me on Tigres like some of the other players. Obviously, like Gignac, they had Eder Valencia. There was definitely Vargas at the back really played well. There was a lot of guys on those teams that really stood out to me. and he didn't really stand out as a great player. So I'm a little concerned about it. I think there's a little bit more hype than anything else for this guy, and I'm hoping for Columbus's sake that he proves me wrong, because anytime we get a Liga MX guy moving into MLS, I really want him to do well, to continue to grow MLS. So that's my thoughts on Zelarayan. Nick, why don't you take either some thoughts on him as well as the other DPs?
No, I think you did a great job filling in everyone on Zelarayan, and yeah, if he's going to be the number 10 for Columbus, there's a lot of players who have wore that number and wore it well and played very well for the Crew. So there's a lot of history there to live up to. But as we said, history does not a successful team make. Looking at Pedro Santos, the 31-year-old, he's got to have a much better season. Last season, he had 11 goals and 6 assists, improving on his 2018 season. But it always seemed like he was on the verge of being a great player. And maybe it was the fact that Higuain was hurt. Maybe it was the fact that there was some roster turnover. We saw Zardes missing a lot of time for national team call-ups. But I always felt that Pedro Santos, he has to take the next step in his game, even at 31-year-old. He's the DP. He's the guy that's going to really try to find the open man. He's probably got one of the highest soccer IQs on the team. He's just got to translate it into his play. And I think if he can pick up his game, that will make Zelarayan better. That will make Zardes better, because we know Zardes is looking to pass and get other offensive-minded players involved in the play as much as he is about scoring his own goals. So if Zardes is going to be looking for Pedro, kind of trailing on a run, dummying a ball through to the far post, Pedro's got to take advantage of that. He does that, Columbus is a playoff team. He has another mediocre season, Columbus misses the playoffs. For me, he's the most important player, and I know you're going to talk about Giassi Zardes as your most important player, and it's hard not to. The guy is potentially, arguably, he is the top scorer for Americans in the MLS. Like, he is going to be the one that is going to get the lion's share of goals for Columbus. But to me, Pedro Santos has to be the one to kind of put it all together.
Yeah, Pedro Santos, he really has to improve upon his finishing. He had better stats last season than he did in the shortened season, like kind of the half season that he had with Columbus in 2018, where he only had 1 goal and 7 assists. Last year, he had 11 goals and 6 assists. That's decent. His finishing is, I mean, when you're watching this guy, he's kind of like a Nemanja Nikolic type. And you know how we feel about Nemanja Nikolic. This guy there's been so many times where you're like, oh, it's a goal. And then he misses it. You're like, what? How did he miss that and not finish that? So if he can improve on his finishing and continue that growth of the stats, he can definitely be the most important piece for Columbus. Giassi Zardes, though, is that guy. 13 goals last season, 19 goals the year before for Columbus. As Giassi Zardes goes, so do the Columbus Crew. Now, bringing in a guy like Fernando Adi, that kind of changes things up a little bit. All that weight is not necessarily going to be strictly on him. They could possibly go into a 2 up front type of formation, where this has been a team who's played a lone striker formation for a very long time. So that they could change things up, bringing in Adi. Move Pedro Santos up to the front a little bit. So lots of different options. That Adi move definitely opens things up for Caleb Porter. But Giassi Zardes, I think he's going to be very important to this team. So those are my thoughts on those guys, Nick.
Yeah, and you're right with bringing in Adi, bringing in a youngster in J.J. Williams, who's a 22-year-old Generation Adidas striker. He had 7 goals in the USL last season for Birmingham, so he knows how to find the back of the net. Let's just see if he can be that great supplemental player for the rest of the squad. Maybe you see him in a lot of U.S. Open Cup action against maybe some lesser talented opponents. He could be the breakout player, that complementary striker to work with Zardes, to work with Adi, and to maybe pair up well with Nagbe once they get the attack going. So look for J.J. Williams to be that breakout youngster. But you're right in saying that they've been playing a lot of lone striker in the past. But Caleb Porter has always talked about trying to keep what Berhalter built, and tweak it a little bit to play the way he wants to, or to take advantage of certain matchups that he sees when they're prepping for their opponents. So maybe we see them line up in a 4-4-2 or a 4-2-3-1 with a lone striker up front, but really look for a lot of these players to get out to the wings, get some mismatches, get some odd numbers, get some player overloads, and then see if they can't get that ball in the middle. See if Zardes can't link up with Santos running on, or Adi running on, or running in for a header or something like that. So look for that really kind of 1-2 give and go. What is great about what Berhalter built and what Porter has kept in place is kind of that back line. And for the starting 11, Mike, that you put together, you have Valenzuela, Sjoberg, Mensah, and Affel as the starting back four, with Eloy Room as the projected goalkeeper there. That's an excellent back line. Harrison Affel and Mensah, those guys are household MLS names if you've been around the league. If you're just starting to get into the league and starting to figure out who these guys are, watch those two guys play, because not only can they mark very well, they know how to transition into the attack. That's something that Berhalter has instilled, that when you're moving forward, when you transition from the defense to the offense, and I'm Greek here, I'm talking with my hands just underneath the camera, so sorry if it looks a little ping-pongy there. When you're transitioning from the defense to the offense, you know where your players should be. You look to knock the ball into that space versus looking up and finding where they're at the time. Those guys know how to play that very well and can really spring a transition. Then moving up from the midfield, you've got Will Trapp and Artur. Again, two guys who have been in the system for a long time, two guys who are very familiar with each other and their Columbus Crew teammates, who are going to be able to help break out and help that transition and get the ball forward. And then we've got Pedro Santos, Silla Ryan, Nagbe playing in that three kind of attacking midfielders role, and then Gyasi Zardes as the lone striker, as we have it set up now. But we'll see what Porter tweaks. And in today's game, not just in the MLS, but around the world, a starting lineup is only something you put on paper. As the game unfolds, your players are moving all over the pitch, getting to the positions where they need to. You see adjustments made where strikers are dropping back to the defense to try and receive and get some more touches and influence the game. You see guys on the wings getting into the channels behind the defense if they can, exploiting that space if it's there for them. So these formations are all very fluid, and that's the way the modern soccer game is played. So that's my take on the starting 11, on the breakout youngster as we roll through Columbus here. Mike, any of that you want to touch on or add to, and then let's dive into the ceiling and the floor for the Crew.
Yeah, just as a breakout youngster there, J.J. Williams, a striker, 22-year-old, 17 appearances last season for Birmingham Legion of the USL, and scored 7 goals. So a decent strike rate there in the USL. And again, that was, I think that he kind of took a hit as a breakout youngster today with the signing of Adi, because he's probably not going to get as many minutes now as he was going to before Adi. But other than that, most important player, Gyasi Zardes. You got to get an improvement in goals from Gyasi Zardes. If he regresses, it's trouble for Crew, just because, the depth at striker. Fernando Adi, remember, this is a guy coming off a really bad year, some personal issues as far as, DUIs and whatnot. He could be a complete bust and turn out to be nothing. And then you've got Jay Hamilton and J.J. Williams backing him up. So not a ton of depth there if Adi doesn't work out. So that he's very, very important from that standpoint. And they're going to get some goals from the midfield. Santos is going to come through. Silla Ryan is going to score some goals. We touched on that earlier. But really Zardes needs to carry the load for this team to be successful. So with that being said, predictions as far as ceiling and floor for this club. I think the ceiling, if all goes well, is going to compete towards the top of the Eastern Conference and get themselves a home playoff game. I currently have them sitting in about the 4th seed in the East. I think they could jump into possibly even the 3rd seed, maybe compete for that top in the Eastern Conference, but that's going to be pushing it. So I'm gonna stick probably with the 4th seed in the East as far as ceiling. Floor is going to be barely missing the playoffs. I think this team will just miss out. They've got a lot of talent, but if all goes for naught, then I expect to see them miss the playoffs and be one of those teams that's kind of fighting for one of those last spots in the Eastern Conference. Nick, what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I don't think they're going to compete for a top 3 spot in the Eastern Conference. You know how stacked New York City is, Atlanta is, and I just don't see Columbus bouncing back from last season's performance with the turnover on the roster to a 3 seed. I think you're right. A 4 seed is probably the best case scenario for them. Get that one home game. If all their attacking players come together and if the defense can hold, yes, then they could probably fight for a 4 seed. And then, yeah, if they continue this roster transition, if they experiment a little more with Porter's tactics and formations, if they continue to turn over the roster, bring in new signings, if Fernando Adi doesn't work out, then, yeah, they'll miss the playoffs. But, hey, the Eastern Conference, we saw it last year. What separated, like, the 5th seed and the 10th seed? What was it, like 4 points maybe by the end of the season? It was a very, very tight Eastern Conference race. I expect more of the same because I don't think anyone in the East has really made a huge improvement as far as talent goes. So it'll be tight, but yeah, worst case scenario, they're on the outside looking in yet again. We're going to get our first taste of the Columbus Crew March 1st. They host New York City FC, the aforementioned top team in the East from last year. So we will get a chance to see if they can get the season off on the right foot at home against a worthy opponent. And we'll see if New York City can adjust to leaving the phone booth for a little bit and heading out to Columbus Crew. That was for you, Mike. I preempted your shot at New York City's tiny field.
New York City, and we talked about the small pitch. I love it. The Columbus Crew preview is now complete with that.
And we are going to take a quick break, hear a word from our sponsors, and then wrap up our show with a preview of Sporting Kansas City. So stay tuned for that. Of a Pitch, an American soccer podcast. And now, as we get ready to conclude with our third and final team preview, one of my favorite Western Conference teams. You heard one of my old favorites in Columbus in the East, but Sporting Kansas City and the Kansas City franchise has been one of my favorites since their inception as the Wiz back in the day. Again, some of the best uniforms too, I think, in the history of the league. So we gotta recognize that as well. But Sporting Kansas City has made some moves. They were our pick last season to win a trophy, to win the league, and really just could not get over the CCL hangover, as well as overcome massive amounts of injuries. So we'll see how they're going to fare better. And to kind of offset some of those injuries and kind of bolster their roster a little bit, they brought in goalkeeper Richard Sanchez on the re-entry draft. To me, this is a pure depth move. Having watched him play here in Chicago, having watched him struggle here in Chicago to be a consistent goalkeeper and to play at an MLS starting capability, this is clearly just a depth move, someone who can back up Melia because he has starting experience in the MLS. I don't see him being part of whatever it is they're building for the future or whatever successes they are going to have within the next season or two. So he's just a reliable backup, and then I'd like to see them develop a new goalkeeper. As far as other players coming in, they brought in Roberto Puncek, a defender on a free transfer. They got Kyrie Shelton, who comes in on a free transfer, as well as Amadou Dia, a defender on a free transfer. So always making good business moves, Sporting Kansas City. Some of the other names to talk about, midfielder Gadi Kinda, who is on loan from the Israeli league, Beitar Jerusalem. This guy has a very high ceiling and can impact the offense immediately. I've always been a little bit wary about players coming in from some of these middle to lower tier European leagues, like the Turkish league, like the Israeli league, the Russian league, the Polish league. But he could be an excellent fit for the MLS, and so we'll have to keep an eye on him. He could be the next big thing out of Kansas City. But the biggest player that they brought in, last but not least, Alan Pulido, who comes in from Chivas Guadalajara in Liga MX. This was like their coup of signings this offseason. To have Pulido end up at Kansas City over Chicago, over some of the other Western Conference teams that had been rumored to be linked with him. Like, this was a huge coup for Kansas City to pull this off. I mean, we hear about it in American sports. Like, well, why would anyone go to Chicago when they can go play in Miami or LA? Or why would anyone end up in the Twin Cities in Minneapolis when you can go play in New York? Why would anyone go to Kansas City when you can play for big soccer cities like New York or even a Miami if they were interested, or the LA squads or anywhere else. This is a huge signing for Kansas City, and a lot of people are saying it solves their need for a goal-scoring striker. They've kind of had to do things by committee, and they haven't really had that consistent top goal scorer, that 10-goal per season guy. Polito could do that and completely change their offense. Mike, what do you think about these guys they brought in? Are you as excited as I am to talk about this? Like, I don't know if you caught that in there. Like, Kansas City with an offense? This is insane.
Well, right. That's something we haven't said for a while. So definitely excited about Alan Polito. I think that's a great signing. I think the type of play that he is really fits Vermees' system well. And I expect some big things out of Polito for sure. Yeah, I mean, some of the other signings as well, getting Kyrie Shelton back, it's a little bit of depth. The Bundesliga, too, didn't work out for him. He's not a superstar. He's not going to get a bunch of accolades, but he's a decent depth piece here in MLS. Gadi Kinda, he's, from everything that I've read about him, sounds like a great piece. As well as some of these other guys, Roberto Puncic, Amadou Dia, definitely guys that can make an impact on this team. But yeah, they've got an offense now with Alan Polito. Listen, they had some offense over the last season or so. They kind of had the transition has really changed with them. It used to be such a stout defense and really had no offense other than like Dom Dwyer, and that was about it. And
that's going back like at least 5 seasons.
Yeah, and now it's kind of switched over where they had a good offense last year with Johnny Russell, Felipe Gutierrez, some of these other guys, and now they're kind of lacking a little bit on the defense. They lost Opara, and Zusi's getting older, Beasler's getting older, those normal stalwarts in the back. But yeah, they've got an offense that's definitely going to help, and I like the moves. Some of the players out for Sporting Kansas City. Jimmy Medranda got picked up in the expansion draft. Defensive/midfielder. You've got goalkeeper Adrian Zenadejas was traded to Nashville. Sesanovic had his option declined. Benny Feilhaber as well. Gideon Zalalem, who ended up over at New York City. Christian Nemeth out of contract. Nicholas Hasler, the old TFC guy, he's out of contract as well. And Rodney Wallace, the old Costa Rican international who played for New York City, he's out of contract as well. So lots of movement from Sporting Kansas City's perspective. But I like they're in better than they're out. They didn't lose a ton of talent on the way out, and they did bring in a good amount of talent on the way in.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to look at a talent perspective, that's one thing. But from just a name recognition perspective, Seth Sinobic, Benny Feilhaber, Christian Nemeth, like these have been staples of the Kansas City lineup for the last several seasons. I can only imagine it as an SKC fan, like how you're feeling watching these guys have their options decline. Maybe they're brought back under different deals. Maybe there's something that the MLS website has left out that we need some of our listeners at home to kind of remind us that, no, they're back. They signed another 2-year deal at a more club-friendly rate. So maybe we do get to continue to see Feilhaber put on the – I don't even know what colors you would say. I'm just thinking of like the Argyle pattern right now for SKC. To put on Sporting Kansas City blue one more time. To see Christian Nemeth come back and maybe bag a couple in a supporting role. But you're right, just based on what the transfer tracker and MLS Soccer has given us here, it has kind of been a shock to see some of these kind of well-known Sporting Kansas City players not have their options decline, not be able to get the deal done. But I will tell you this. I think Sporting Kansas City has earned the benefit of the doubt from the business side of things. They usually don't hang on to players any longer than they should. And they just unfortunately haven't been able to be as good as scouting younger players to bring in and develop as they have about letting a player go before he either flames out or gets a little too old for the league. So I'll give Sporting Kansas City the benefit of the doubt. But if they can't get it done this year, there's going to be a lot of questions asked of Peter Vermees, who he's the sporting director and the coach as well, and the manager.
Right.
I think you would put some notes about that, Mike, about this is kind of Vermees' last chance to prove himself, huh?
Yeah, it's and this is what happens. I kind of want to touch on some of the players out for a second. Is this is what happens when you have a year when you end up with 38 points over the season, a 1.12 points per game average, a goal differential of -18. Look, they had CONCACAF Champions League. That didn't help. That gave them some extra fatigue, caused a lot of injuries. They had a lot of injuries, understood. But when that happens and you finish at the bottom, you got to make some changes. You can't stick with the same team and expect to go back to what you were. It's not how it works in sports. It's not, especially not how it works with a salary cap tied league like MLS. So you got to move on from some of those names. And as far as Peter Vermees goes, look, it's time for him. You can't have two bad seasons. Two bad seasons. It's, this team really hasn't won a lot of hardware outside of a U.S. Open Cup, in a while. So you can't. This guy's not going to last through another bad season. Now, and when I say bad season, that means miss the playoffs really bad, like they did last season. If they barely miss the playoffs at the end of the year, maybe he gets another shot. But I think it could be towards the end of his tenure if things don't turn around for them as of this season. So with that being said, let's get into the designated player review here. So 3 spots. First up, Felipe Gutierrez, 29-year-old midfielder, a former Chilean international, 12 goals and 3 assists last season. Had a really solid season. He's got the pedigree for a DP. He played in the Netherlands, played in La Liga, played in Brazil. He's definitely been around some of the bigger leagues. So 12 goals and 3 assists. This guy's more of a, he is a midfielder, but he's kind of more of a striker than a midfielder. He's going to score more goals and he's going to distribute the ball. So that's kind of puts him into that striker category, although he plays in the midfield. Alan Pulido, who we just talked about in the second spot, 28-year-old striker, just transferred from Chivas, an 8.5 or 10 million. I can't remember what it was. It was large transfer fee.
Right.
Transfer market had him at 4.5 million pounds and listed the transfer fee for Sporting Kansas City at 10.8 million. So did they overpay there? Possibly. But I think that can be made up with jersey sales and not really tickets, because that team is always selling tickets. That's a great atmosphere. They've got a good season ticket base. They don't have to worry about. They're not going to sell more tickets because of this guy, but definitely sell more jerseys. So also he played at Tigres in their youth system. Went to Olympiacos in Greece. There you go, Nick. Good Greek team there. I think it's one of your teams, isn't it?
To be perfectly honest, I really don't follow the Greek league very much. But then again, if you were to follow the Greek league, there's maybe only 3 teams that are competing for the title every year. Anyway, so Olympiacos being one of them. If anyone watches any European soccer Champions League, you're definitely familiar with Olympiacos. So you know that they do assemble players from kind of all over the globe. Not as many Greek players as I think some Greeks would like to see, but the fact that he did have some time in Olympiacos shows that he can play at a top European club.
Absolutely. Johnny Russell.
Yeah, and I like what you're saying, though. As far as did they overpay, if this guy can bag another 12, 15 goals, then he's absolutely worth it. He has 12 goals and 18 appearances, like you said, in the Apertura in that half season in Liga MX. If that translates to another 12, 15 goals, I mean, he doesn't have to win the Golden Boot. He could. He could compete given his record from Mexico and what we have seen Mexican strikers do, or players who are strikers coming from Liga MX to the MLS. They break out. Before the league can catch up to them, they break out. So he could easily justify his price. And again, if SKC wants to do anything, they need to make this splash signing, and they got it done. Now go ahead. Talk about the face of the franchise, if you will, here. Johnny Russell, Mike, what's your feelings on him?
Yeah, I love this guy, man. I just love him. He's a hard worker. He's a grinder. He goes after, he plays with that intensity that, I just love to see. I'm a big hockey fan as well, and this guy kind of reminds me of a hockey player as a soccer player. He's always running after that ball. He's got an engine like no tomorrow, and he's intense as hell, and I just love it. 9 goals and 9 assists last year, 10 and 10 the year before. So definitely putting up good numbers and can score as well as feed the ball to his teammates. So that's, I love that guy's game. I think he can break out more than he already has, with Sporting Kansas City, I think he can get even better, especially if these opposing defenses are really having to focus on Alan Pulido and some of these other guys that are out there now they can't just work on Johnny Russell. They've got to spread thinner with Alan Pulido out there, because as you mentioned with Pulido, he could be in the Golden Boot race. He won the Golden Boot for the Mexican Apertura last season. So if he could do it there, he could do it here. So I think I really like this guy. I think with that intensity, it's only going to do good things for him. And that's pretty much my thoughts on him. What are your thoughts?
There were games last season where Sporting Kansas City just kind of went, here's the ball, Johnny. What can you do for us? Go make something happen. And he had to take on 2, 3, sometimes 4 defenders. And you're just not going to be able to do that. No matter who you are or what league you're in, it's really hard to take on an entire defensive line by yourself. So Russell did what he could, almost that double-double as far as goals and assists again last year. But with the added offense, it should take a little bit of the burden on him, and he can just go out and play and have fun. What he has proven, though, what I think is important to note, is because of how well he's played over the last few seasons for Sporting Kansas City, he's actually gotten called up to the Scottish national team. And I think that's something that players around the world who want to get to their national team, who want to break out on the biggest stage, have kind of said, well, the MLS isn't going to do that for me. Well, Johnny Russell is a reason to stop thinking that way. Carlos Vela kind of too. He can still have an amazing season and go play for Mexico. But Russell used his form in MLS to break into the Scottish national team, and I think a lot of players should be able to follow suit. Now, transitioning into the youngsters, this is where Sporting Kansas City has thrived over the last couple of years. A lot of young guys. I think Gianluca Buscio was even one of the youngest players ever to start a game in MLS history, or one of the youngest players to ever score a goal in MLS history. And as you know, Mike, he's getting interest from clubs like Man United, Inter Milan, Fiorentina. These are the rumors that he's going to be linked. But I agree with you. Another season in MLS is going to really do him good, help him develop a little bit more physically and develop some of the finer points of his game before he signs one of those mega contracts with a big club. So look for him to continue to grow, to continue to get some minutes. He was an excellent depth piece for Vermees last season and should continue to do that and get in some starting roles as the season continues. You also talk about Jalen Lindsey. What do you think about him?
Yeah, so 19-year-old right back. I think he's the heir apparent to Graham Zusi. He started getting playing time towards the end of last season, so I think he's definitely going to pull some minutes behind a 33-year-old Graham Zusi. The guy's not going to be able to do what he did in the past. He's not going to be able to make it through those MLS summers. You got to have some minutes from that young kid behind him, so that if they are in a playoff race, the bigger and better name than Zusi will be able to be there towards the end of the season. So I think we definitely expect to see Jalen Lindsey get some minutes there. He features regularly for the U.S. Youth National Team. So this is a guy who is right there to break out. He's young. He's got he's been groomed very well by that Sporting Kansas City youth system. So I expect to see him kind of make his way up to being an everyday type player maybe in the next season or two.
With that, our projected starting 11 in the 4-3-3 formation, Tim Melia in goal. He's not going anywhere. Barring a major injury, Melia is not going anywhere. The back line, we're projecting Dia, Beasler, Fontes, and Zusi. In the midfield, we're looking at Gutierrez, Ilya Sanchez, and Gadi Kinda. And then your 3 strikers up front, Daniel Shallowy, Alan Pulido, and Johnny Russell. So another great lineup on paper. Let's just see if they can stay healthy and kind of pick up and put last season behind them as just kind of the fluke.
So 2 notes I wanted to break out here is one, your comment about this team, this lineup on paper is fantastic. Another one. That is usually the case in the preseason when there's no injuries involved, right? Every team in MLS is going to have a really solid starting 11. It's once the injuries start happening, what does the depth look like? And I think that's the biggest piece for what's going to really set these teams apart. Secondly, as far as center backs, they are rumored to have some contact with a couple different center backs. Nothing big, not big time names like we mentioned with San Jose and Alanis. But decent signings from Europe. that we might see happen here over the next few days. So there have been some rumors there. So just wanted to note that as well. We could see, Beasler getting a backup or possibly somebody to take over minutes for Fontes.
So looking at the ceiling and the floor, I mean, I think the most important player goes without saying, Alan Pulido. We talked about how excited we were that they get this wonderful striker, and he's going to drive the best case scenario for Sporting Kansas City. If their offense is clicking, if Pulido is scoring 15, 17 goals, if Johnny Russell can pitch in another 8 to 10, and if the rest of the offense, if Kinda can get involved, if you see Zusi starting to make those runs from his wingback position and getting involved in the offense, then Kansas City is having a good season when Zusi's pushing up like that. If Beasler's pushing up like that, I think they can compete for a third spot in the Western Conference. All things aside, all things going well for Kansas City. But if they continue the same trend, if they're bit by the injury bug again, if their young players don't develop, if Alan Pulido just can't adjust to the league, to the travel, to whatever else is going on, Johnny Russell has a bit of a regression, then again, they're fighting for a playoff spot and probably not making the playoffs if they do reach the floor potential this season. And Sporting Kansas City opens up their season February 29th at Vancouver. So it'll be a good test to get some of their players acclimated, to get some of their young guys and their signings into the lineup and see how Vermees coaches in game. But we'll get our first look at Sporting Kansas City on February 29th. So, Mike, give us your final thoughts on Kansas City and wrap us up here and take us home.
Yeah, I agree 100% with Alan Pulido being the most important player. The predictions are spot on there, Nick. I think that's pretty much what we're going to see from them. And I'm interested to see that first game on February 29th against Vancouver, another revamped Western Conference side. Should be a good matchup there. Two probably level type opponents that have improved in the offseason with big striker signings. And with that, that pretty much concludes our team previews. So thanks for joining us for those.